Welcome to the Bayou Progressive. I'm Quentin Anthony Anderson, and today I'm joined by my friend Tania Nyman, Democratic candidate for Congress in Louisiana's 5th Congressional District. Nyman is a longtime Louisiana advocate whose public work is very well known here in Baton Rouge political circles and has focused on defending public schools, libraries, fair maps, democratic accountability, and what she argues are the basic public institutions that make communities work. She's running on what she calls a newer deal Democrat platform and has dived headfirst into a crowded but impressive competitive Democratic primary. Tania, thank you for joining me tonight.
Thank you for having me on, Quentin.
Okay, so people in Baton Rouge political circles know you from your years of advocacy work, and especially around public schools, fair maps, and particularly the St. George fight, which is where we first met. Um,
hmm
you're not a first-time candidate. You've run for Metro Council here in EBR and for the school board. For
Yep.
voters in the 5th District who may be meeting you for the first time, who is Tania Nyman, and what made you decide to run for office initially rather than staying purely in advocacy? We'll talk about what made you run for Congress, but what made you sort of transition from being just an advocate to somebody that felt like you could be effective in public office?
Um, I don't know if I ever didn't feel like I could be effective in public office, but I didn't know if I could get elected. And
Mm.
so that was sort of a different thing. And so I never expected to run, to be honest. I always just thought I would try to find candidates that I liked and would support them. And that's what I did when I supported Belinda Davis when she ran for the school board in 2017. So in 2018, there was the 2017 election was a special election. The 2018 was the regular election. And Mike Godet, who was the Republican who'd been elected in the 2017 special election, was poised to win that seat for lack of opposition. And it just, it, I couldn't do it. I was so aghast that there was going to be no candidate to challenge him and to try to raise the issues, especially at that particular moment in East Baton Rouge Parish. And so, I'm always asking, what can I do within my power to affect some good in the community and in the world at large? And I knew at that point that I could afford the qualifying fees and I could put up a website. So put my name on the ballot, put up a website with all the information, with as much information that I could fit on there that I'd learned over the years from the advocacy work I'd done since 2012. So it had been 6 years.
Mm.
And at least I knew that I could do that. And I was pleasantly surprised that, I didn't really know if anybody would support me, but people started coming up and saying, I want to help. I want to volunteer. I want to hang door hangers. And then I was like, okay, I'll buy door hangers. Let's do this.
Mm.
And, considering the short time for that election and my limited budget, I think I did, and the amount that Mike Godet spent between his own personal spending and the super PACs, I think it was close to $100,000 for his budget. And I had like three to four. And I think I gave a good run for his money. But most importantly, I think a lot of people learned a lot about the school situation from that. And so it was important to do.
So, what made you run for Metro Council 2 years later?
So Metro Council was kind of a similar situation in terms of a Republican was poised to win the seat for lack of opposition. And but okay, there was a little bit, it was there was an appointment period because Barbara Freiberg had been elected to the state legislature.
Mhm.
So first the Metro Council was going to appoint somebody and they appointed Jen Rocca. And Jen Rocca was lovely. She's a lovely person, but I didn't get the impression that she necessarily had all the information she needed in order to protect the parish from the St. George effort, and that she understood the way and the history behind the consolidated government or the tax ramifications of the proposed city. And so I felt like, and it was during the shutdown, so it was really hard to meet with people. So I felt like, well, this was one way to at least give good information for the community, also for Jen Rocca. So if she needed to push back on efforts to try, if she was going to, kind of roll into the seat, since it was a Republican leading district, at least she would also have information available to her to resist efforts to sort of just steamroll the city, as opposed to the city parish. And so that's what I did. I did the same thing. I put my name on the ballot and put up a website with the information I knew. And I had learned that information because I'd been one of the spokespersons for Better Together Residents Against the Breakaway. So I'd done all the research, and so it was just a way to try to raise awareness. It was very difficult to try to get a lot of that information into our local media. That's always been an ongoing battle, whether it's fighting against the efforts to privatize the East Baton Rouge public school system, or whether it was trying to raise awareness about the harm, the way the city of St. George was going to harm even the people in the city of St. George. They're not going to benefit. There's some rich folks who are going to benefit, but all the people who just live and work in the community are going to be hurt by the creation of that city. And so I was just trying to raise awareness about that. And if I could get in the seat, wonderful, because I thought I would be a really good advocate to prevent the greatest harm and do some good. But at the very least, Jen Rocca would have some information that she could use to, do the right thing.
You feel like she's benefited from your presence in her district.
Well, not so much since I don't know about recently. I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, things did not exactly go as I'd hoped. I was certainly
Mm,
hoping that the city of St. George would be defeated, and I think there
mm,
was a way to prevent it from happening. And everybody should know that the Supreme Court's vote to approve it was even narrow. It was split. It was one vote, and so the shenanigans that went on, I imagine, to get that one vote on the Supreme Court. Haven't had time to document too much, but there was
yeah.
some shenanigans, and so
And
I
for people who aren't from Baton Rouge or might not be as familiar with the St. George situation, do you want to kind of frame what St. George is here in Baton Rouge, what that fight was, and what the ongoing battles are? I can kind of simplify it, which is
I was going to say, I don't. Can I do that quickly? That may be my struggle. I will try. So when they consolidated the government way back in the 50s, see, we're already off
there
to a
it
bad
is.
start.
There it is. There it is. There's a question on here. I have a question about it goes at this, but go ahead.
Okay, but let me try to jump up a little bit more. So the city of St. George. I mean, so one thing I want to say, I'm going to go off on a tangent. I've had a couple of people suggest to me that, oh, St. George never would have happened if you hadn't denied the school system. And I'm like, that is not
Yeah.
why they ended up with that city, right? And that's certainly not that, and that wouldn't have been a good thing for the parish either, to allow them to have a breakaway school district without the breakaway city. And they still shouldn't get the school district, might I add. On May 16th, everybody needs to fight to vote against that amendment that's going to be on the ballot. Um,
But the
but
point remains that the school district was the crown jewel. Like that was the goal.
I, mm,
You
I
think?
don't
Okay,
think
go
so
ahead.
anymore. I don't
Okay,
think so
so let
anymore.
okay, so let's lay it out for folks what we're talking about so that people don't get lost outside of EBR.
Yeah. Okay, this is going to be the whole interview.
I have to be a good host, so I got to police this a little bit.
Okay, do your best.
Okay,
Okay,
so what happened in 2019? What was on the ballot in 2019?
in 2019, what
Well, I
what
guess the vote for incorporation.
oh, was this the second vote? I'm sorry, the timeline
Yeah.
gets a little fuzzy for me. So they lost, they tried to get the petition on the ballot and didn't get enough signatures to get it on the ballot.
And
So
what
then
was it that they were petitioning to get on the ballot?
the city of St. George, which was part of the unincorporated area of East Baton Rouge Parish, which
And
is
why
related
did
to
they want a
our,
city?
our bogus, they claimed they wanted the city because they
The
wanted a
law
school district.
and the
Um,
state law says that you can't have a school district unless you have an incorporated city.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. And the unique way the parish is put together is that the city limits have not been expanded as they
Hmm.
were supposed to be
Right.
now for 30, 40 years. And so if they had made sure that those city limits had been expanded as they were supposed to be, then there wouldn't have been any unincorporated area for them
Hmm.
to create their city. So there's a lot of shenanigans going on there. Um, so they got it on the ballot under the pretense of getting the school district. even though that wouldn't guarantee them the school district,
Yep.
because they would still have to go back to the legislature
Hmm.
and get the two bills passed and get a constitutional amendment passed statewide as well as within the parish. But they proceeded with the city, but they also gerrymandered the district lines of that second attempt to cut out any of the
Yeah.
areas that didn't support it in the first go round. So, I mean, I am
Yep.
talking about like around apartment complexes.
Hmm.
The lines are so clearly discriminatory. The fact that any
Yeah.
court would rule that it wasn't a violation of some law somewhere, was kind of outrageous. So, all right, where were we? What was the next? What was the point of
Okay,
this?
so so we were framing why the St. George fight was important and what it was about. So the St.
Yes.
George incorporation effort was, and this is where you said that you had a point of disagreement. I buy the public line, which is that they looked at the state law. They wanted their own separate school district, largely because they did not want to be in the majority black East Baton Rouge Parish school district. They wanted, to create a school district out of this part of Baton Rouge that is overwhelmingly white, and the school district therefore would be overwhelmingly white.
So this is
Uh,
what's interesting.
Go ahead.
It's actually kind of related to our fundamentally flawed accountability system.
Okay.
Like our state school scores are discriminatory. They clearly do not reflect the quality of the education that's being offered in schools. The
That's
only
fair.
thing they do is reflect the demographics in that school system or in that school district,
Mhm.
right? So if you have more poverty in the school, if you have more poverty in the district, it's going to get a low score.
Yep.
And that's just a straight line if you look at it. So when Bobby Jindal got in 2012 and did, or not, was it? Yeah, it was 2012. He did Act One and Act Two,
Hmm.
pretty much disempowered school boards and passed laws that, with the accountability system, that really favored targeted school districts with high poverty, which, because of Louisiana's history, racist history, typically means majority black, targeted them for privatization. And so essentially, part of it, I think, was almost like that fight is that the majority white area, the leaders in that area could see once they passed Act One and Act Two, if they didn't break off, they were going to get wholesale privatized in East Baton Rouge Parish, just like New Orleans got wholesale privatized
Yeah.
following Katrina. And so
Hmm.
it also was this, instead of fighting the good fight for public schools for everyone, they were going to, cut off and leave the district to be wholesale privatized.
Yeah.
And so it's actually about, this is where I get into, this is voting rights. The community is being systematically deprived of its voting rights through the privatization of their public schools. I mean, for decades, think about how hard people fought in order to get African Americans elected to the East Baton Rouge Parish School Board. And now there's this carefully well-funded marketing campaign to suggest that privatization is going to allow them to improve the quality of education for the children in their community, when in fact what's happening is they're abdicating their voting rights. And then when they abdicate the voting rights, the charter school boards with the unelected individuals, they enter into business contracts with the charter management organizations affiliates. And so the money, the tax dollars for their schools don't no longer get invested into the community. They get siphoned out into national and multinational corporations. And so that's why you see all these new schools. New Orleans, they just had a post this morning about New Orleans selling off their properties.
Hmm.
The infrastructure, the public infrastructure is being decimated. And all of these for-profit real estate companies, it's the biggest boondoggle. That's why Michael Bloomberg poured $1 million
Hmm.
into our school board race. You know, it's because our charter school law, and people should know, I should say this very clearly. It's because of the way charter schools were authored, specifically in Louisiana. A lot of the states make sure that they have a clause that ensures that public tax dollars cannot be spent to effectively purchase private assets for a company, right? Like any money that is spent on an asset becomes public property. It becomes the
Yeah.
property of the school board. We don't have that in our charter school law. So it's attracting all of this out-of-state money and targeting the communities that are vulnerable because of our flawed and discriminatory accountability system to come in and take over so that they can profit. Now, where were we?
Okay. Well, so yeah, we did just go off a little bit.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard.
It
So
it
when
is.
we're talking about the same trying to get their own school district,
Yeah,
so
and
absolutely, what was interesting in that fight was, the proponents certainly didn't come in and say, oh, it's. They were like, oh, the school district's struggling, but and
yeah,
so we just want to have good schools for our kids, and so there was this. And if you tried to criticize them on the race thing, they would say, we're not racist. And trying to explain to them, it doesn't matter what your intentions are. Your proposal is effectively discriminating against a majority, the African American population and the rest of the parish.
yeah.
So that is institutionalized racism. You can't, there's a difference between bigotry and institutionalized racism. And so,
And I don't think that they don't know. I don't think that I think they feign ignorance. Any political
some
uh,
do.
uh I think that when they say things like, we're just looking out for our kids, I think that they know what that means when they say it. I think there's a reason why it was only the people in St. George that got to vote on the incorporation effort in St. George. I think that you didn't have to say it out loud. Everybody just kind of understood.
Yeah. And especially after they gerrymandered all of the neighborhoods that had
Oh,
significant
yeah.
populations of people of color. Yeah, no, it got a little more blatant. Yeah. And everybody's going to suffer for it, which I think is, I wish we would learn that lesson, an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. It's absolutely true.
I don't know if some of the people who are the most passionate supporters of that movement b- believe that. I think that even if they saw a degradation in the quality of education, just the absence of black students would be, from their perspective, an improvement. I think that when you hear, suburban families talk about, their fear of their kids going to public school, I don't think that it's this more philosophical belief that, like, a public education is worse. I think that it's the visual of my kid going to a school with these other kids. And if it were just other kids, if it was just other white kids, I I think that the movement for privatization, for charters, for vouchers is all the same thing. And I think the logical extreme of that fight is the St. George effort, which is
See,
you
I
you
think I
go
think
ahead.
those fights are about getting rid of public education. So entirely. So just as a reminder that public education has not really existed in this
Yeah.
country for white or black poor
Yeah.
people, right? And that's I talk about that from my own family history. Like my grandmother had an eighth grade education. My grandfather had a fifth grade level education because, first of all, access to public education was not guaranteed, and quite frankly, my like grandfather was expected to work. So by the time he hit 14 years old, when the cutoff age was, he'd only managed to get
Hmm.
through fifth grade.
Yeah.
And so people think that, like somehow that white people were guaranteed public education. And not, well, poor white people. No, it's poor white people were not poor people, period. Were not
Hmm.
given access. Now, I mean, I know it was exacerbated by the race thing, but by the race issue and in segregated schools and things like that, probably more of a question maybe in the inner city, where there you would have schools where,
Yeah. Yeah.
but in rural areas, you know, there's no.
Yeah. No, I can certainly see that. I
So
think
I
that,
think that's what they're trying to get back to. And
uh,
they're targeting the most vulnerable populations, poor black children, to get that wedge started. And then there you go. It'll
and I
just,
think and I think that's it. I think the intellectual or thought leaders behind the efforts that we're talking about, I think absolutely what you're saying. It is an effort to undermine and dismantle public education and other public institutions, but I think they
Mhm.
are using people who are motivated by cultural wedge issues. They're using
um,
people who are just like, I just want my kids out of those black schools.
yeah. Well, there's some of that and some of it's, some of it's not. Well, anyway, my point is that and I've said this before, the wealth and power will always exploit whatever bigotry exists in your heart to
Oh
divide the
yeah.
people so that they can maintain their wealth and power. So, and that's for any, it's not just on race, right? It's
Yeah.
whatever kind of hatred you or bigotry you have in your heart, it will get exploited to and ultimately used against you. And so the wealthy and powerful are really good at doing that. And if they can't identify a, such a sentiment, then they will instill one.
So what did the St. George fight teach you about, and this is a good segue, about race, class, power, and the limits of traditional civic engagement?
The limits. What is the limits of traditional civic engagement? Voting?
I
You
guess,
mean that?
yeah, voting, showing up at your public meetings, voicing your opposition or support of something, because now you've run for office. This will be your third time, so there's clearly, I don't want to say a ceiling, because I do want people to show up at these public meetings and I want them to advocate. But what have you learned about what the limits of your ability to influence policy from the outside are from that fight?
Well, one, I think knowing your history is very important.
Hmm.
Always scratching beneath the surface. One thing I think that does help me is actually my education is in literature and English, creative writing and literature. I thought I was going to spend my life just, sitting around reading good books. And, and, but one of the things I recognize is if you track the narratives, you can better anticipate, um, I don't, the truth underneath. So I don't know, you look for yellow flags, you watch how many start popping up. In terms of the limits at the public meetings, showing up very often is absolutely important, but trying to push back on narratives that are disingenuous and trying to provide a narrative that actually provides, like credible information for people to get a hold of, and to move towards policies that are actually going to get them where they want to be. Like I think most people really are trying to fight for a better world, but I
Yeah.
think very often we get misled because, and I'm going to make mistakes, right? I think I've been pretty good at identifying some narratives that I'm like, that's not what's going on. They may be claiming that's what this is about, but that's not what's going on. And some of that is based upon the research I've done before, so I know there's some discrepancies. But I wish more people would get a little suspicious, especially if something's getting a lot of traction suddenly, you get a little suspicious. I mean, I there's a quote I always say: "The world you see depends upon the news you get," and everybody
Yeah.
should know that, especially since the repeal of the Fairness Doctrine and the passage of that 1996 Telecommunications Act, which allowed media conglomerates to exist. Before we had, everything was broken up, so you'd have more viewpoints. Now we've got what, 3 billionaires that own all the news sources. Um,
Well, according to Brendan Carr, the fairness doctrine is still enacted. Brendan
really?
Carr, I mean, that's his argument for why James Tallarico could not be on Colbert.
Well, you see, and I look at that and I go, see, there's going to be arguments. So my understanding is Reagan repealed the Fairness Doctrine in the 80s,
Mhm.
and before the Fairness Doctrine, Fox News couldn't exist because they would have to have had people on with a
I think
variety
it
of
only applied
viewpoints.
to network. I think it only applied to network
That might
television.
be true. That might be
Yeah.
true, but still, I think there's been more squeakiness, more people claiming, hey, we need to bring back the Fairness Doctrine, and so now they're trying to derail it. That's my
Yeah, because of the whole, like, Hollywood is liberal, the media is liberal, and so the way that you push back on that is that you force the liberal media to both sides it. So, all right, the Democrats say the sky is blue, Republicans say the sky is red. You decide, and that's from their perspective fairness.
Well, I mean, I do think that I do think that they need to provide news shows need to provide more than one perspective, and Fox News does not do that, right? I mean, I have to tell you, I get all my news from print, so I have there's certain tones I struggle to listen to, so I get all
Fox
my
News does in the weird way of, like, it'll be five five very strongly, strong opinionated conservatives with huge credentials, and then they'll have, some guy who's stuttering and, has a speech impediment that comes
right.
and,
Yeah.
defends the liberal argument and just gets the proverbial crap beat out of him on TV. Yeah.
It's yeah, a straw man. It's the straw man technique. It's a total
Exactly.
logical fallacy. Yeah, you put up somebody that was going to present the argument in the weakest way possible so you can easily derail it. It's an old trick, right? But then the media conglomerates coupled with that makes it all that worse. So,
Yeah.
I think we
Yeah.
do need to address this. We need more news outlets. But in terms of, the world you see depends upon the news you get, and we're not getting good information. People are not getting good information. And so, the other story I would tell was that sort of my mother, the image of my mother standing in the middle of the living room, shaking the newspaper, going, "Do you know what they're not telling you?" Just, being the loving, supportive child I was, I would roll my eyes, but I can really appreciate that now.
I- No, I keep wondering what is there is sort of a fine line from a public perception standpoint between a conspiracy theorist and somebody who does their homework, right? Because it to some degree it looks the same to the
Well, yeah.
average person.
Well, what was so funny is when we first started doing fighting against the breakaway school district, there was a group of parents, one community, one school district, and we would go down there every day, and that was eye opening, just going down to the Capitol and sitting in the meetings and realizing the first time I went to testified at an education committee meeting, I was like, they just need to hear the logical argument. and and then you go,
Yeah.
oh, logic doesn't matter. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, but we started joking amongst ourselves. You would start talking to people about the issue, and you would realize, oh no, there's a flicker in their eyes, and you're like, okay, they started looking at me like I'm wearing that tinfoil hat. So I had to back off. So yeah, there's absolutely that moment where you realize
That it sounds like you have a
maybe.
murder board at home.
Well, wasn't that was that when you just pull up the
Yeah,
string
yeah,
and
yeah,
everything?
exactly.
I'm not familiar with that phrase, so yeah. So yeah, that I do wish we had more good information. I try to read from a variety of sources. There's certain issues where I get very wary because I know I'm not really in a position to know.
Yeah.
Like there are issues I'm sure that I may think I know exactly what we need to do, but for example, if I get elected to Congress, I'm going to get in there and there's going to be more information that's available to me that will hopefully let me make a good decision. And so,
Hmm.
what I think when people, to get it back to the current campaign, why do I think that people should consider me a viable candidate is because hopefully my track record at the local level demonstrates my ability, my inclination, and my determination to seek out information from a variety of sources and then to assess it and make the best decision, a good decision. Do I think I'm never going to make a mistake? No, I'm sure I'll make a mistake, but I hope my track record demonstrates those mistakes will hopefully be few and far between, and not because of a failure of character, that I would have done my best.
So let's kind of bridge the conversation that we were having about kind of your local fights, and let's bridge it to the national purview. So you've been involved in a lot of fights here in Baton Rouge over school governance, segregation, breakaway efforts, redistricting. What do those local fights reveal about the larger national political movement or moment that we're in right now?
I think our democracy's under threat, right? We're being thrown under the bus. And the only way we can protect that is to try to start defending the fundamental values of democracy, our constitutional rights, election integrity, which includes fair maps, access. Look
Hmm.
at the SAVE Act right now that is trying to deny people the ability to vote, essentially implementing a new poll tax in the way they're doing it and the
Yeah.
speed with which they're doing it. And so you can see the efforts to undermine a healthy democracy. And then Citizens United, right? We have to overturn Citizens United. Or there's a variety of ways to address Citizens United, but from the congressional level, I would hope we could get enough people in there to do something about that, to get the massive amount of dark money in campaigns. We got to get them out of elections. And if I, that's kind of what I've been doing at the local level. I mean, public education, the fight for public education is because it's the cornerstone of a healthy democracy. It was always important to me about public education. My father was a public school teacher. I am a product of the New Orleans public school system. decades before they were privatized. It was always important to me that my children go to public schools, regardless of what income bracket I was in, because uh, in order to respect the inherent dignity of all people, you need to be able to have contact with people from a variety of places, right? You need to, and variety of backgrounds and different races and different religions, and you
Hmm.
can't, and different income brackets. And I think that's the one that really gets me, because there's certainly a lot of private schools where you can get some racial and diversity and religious diversity, but you can't get class diversity in a private school. And as someone who grew up barely lower middle class from really modest means, like,
Hmm.
you know, it was important that when I got to my high school, where the majority of the kids were middle to upper middle class, even though it was a public high school, I was kind of some diversity for them. I don't, you know, my parents were more akin to working class than it was their parents, you know, who are all doctors and attorneys and that kind of thing. So it, that income, and then the opportunity for me to go to a school and demonstrate my ability. I mean, some of the worst bigotry in this country is class. It's classist, you know,
Yeah.
if you're, and so um, the public school system is the only place where we have a diversity of students on all of that, right? And so, yeah. So when they tried to ruin my public schools where my kids were going to school, I was like, okay, enough. And then it just went on from there. So, and I could see that they were trying to take away the democratic control of the public schools, and it was horrifying. So, yeah. And then I learned about the way in which our whole city parish government was set up to systematic. Did you know you must have known they tried to create a breakaway city in Scotlandville in the late 70s.
I did not know that.
Yes. Yeah, it's a very, and so I don't need to think you want to spend this whole interview listening to that story. It would take me too long. But that absolutely illustrates the way in which our governance structures are reconfigured periodically to continue to systematically deprive certain populations of meaningful representation.
So that's a perfect segue. So a lot of the fights that you've had locally, and for good reason, the priority has been local democratic control. Um,
Yeah,
but you're running for federal office. You're running to go to Congress, where a lot of the policies, a lot of the solutions, from a policy perspective, are national mandates, federal intervention, federal programs. How do you see your advocacy, your policy advocacy, changing or adjusting to the different sort of terrain and the different tools that would be at your disposal as a federal office holder?
so one, I've been fighting for democratic control on the level that is available to me.
Yeah.
So you put me at the federal level, I'm going to continue to fight for democratic control and the integrity of all those rights. You know, and I'll be honest with you, I don't think America's ever had a fully functional democracy, and I think it's worth fighting for. And so, wherever I am able to do that, I will engage in that fight to the best of my abilities. I think there's a lot of fights for that at the federal level right now. And I think one of the things I do see is the way in which federal policy very often is not written is not careful about how it's going to end up getting implemented at the states or local level, right? So even when we look at when you look at the public education policies, it was like both parties were making moves to ultimately undermine public education. They weren't marketed that way, obviously, but the Republicans were the ones pushing the accountability. We need more tests.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then the Democrats were pushing, oh, we could get the market involved and they'll improve the curriculum, the quality of the education. Well, market means privatization, you know? And so the way in which those two things dovetailed with the accountability system targeting essentially high poverty and in Louisiana, majority African American districts, and then the marketing, the privatization, introducing the profit motive, you know, you had a perfect storm. And so I don't think, for example, that President Obama, by any stretch of the imagination, thought race to the top was going to be used like that manner in Louisiana. But that is what, in fact, kind of started happening, right? It just started taking off.
You don't think that that was the give that Democrats often have to extend to get Republican support for education reform?
Well, probably then like one of those compromises, but I
Hmm.
would think that very often sometimes they don't, it's not that they knowingly make a compromise. They don't anticipate the maneuvering. Like they don't, you know what
Hmm.
I mean? Like
Hmm.
they don't, they may be suspicious, but they're like, well, I can't really push back on that reasoning because they don't have, I mean, when's the last time we've had a real progressive Democrat? And have we ever had a real progressive Democrat in?
We haven't had a real progressive Democrat. I was just talking to somebody the other day. The only president that has ever owned that label was a Republican. He's one of my favorite presidents. He probably has personal foibles that would get him canceled today, but from a historical 50,000 foot view, Teddy Roosevelt is the only president to own the label of progressive.
There you go. So, well,
Yeah.
there you go. So, uh, I think that try. I don't think there's good information getting out of Louisiana into the federal government very often.
But I guess the whatever maneuvering that the privatized folks, the free market folks, the people who want to undermine public education, whatever maneuvering they're doing here, that exists everywhere. Like that motive, that ability to take advantage of federal loopholes, that exists everywhere. So I guess what I'm curious about is why do you think that Democrats often get I don't because I don't know if I necessarily agree with fooled, but why do you think that Democrats often end up kind of holding the bag in terms of some of the policy implications of otherwise, big, bold, ambitious goals that they'll have, but there are these bullet holes that have been riddled in it. Because Obama was quite proud of Race to the Top.
Actually, he changed. So
Did he?
here's a little note. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely, he changed. And so let's see. In 2008, he nominated Arnie Duncan for
Yep.
Secretary of Education
Yep.
and passed over Linda Darling Hammond. I think I got her hyphenated name in the right order. It might be Hammond Darling, but um, and I was like, well, he had to do that because just like you said, he's got to compromise, right? He couldn't get Linda Darling Hammond. But in 2012, I was waiting for that, and that's not what happened.
No.
But halfway through his second term, I think he realized, I don't know, right? But there was a switch. Arnie Duncan was removed, and we had Every Student Succeeds Act instead.
Hmm.
Now, I don't think it necessarily managed to get down to do what was supposed to do in Louisiana either, because the problem is, right, there are limitations to what our
Hmm.
federal officials can do, because if all the corruption and all the local officials are determined to subvert its intention, there's you can't pour enough money into a corrupt system to fix things, right?
And almost any federal program would require states to opt in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we still don't we no longer participate in Social Security. For goodness sake. I mean, the government employees, right? Oh my God. You know how many people that's now facing can't retire because they're suddenly recognizing that they have no means to
I
support
mean,
themselves?
don't get me started on the solvency of Social Security because we could just make people pay
All we
on
need to
the
do is raise
uh,
the cap,
yeah,
Quentin.
raise
All
the
we need
cap.
to do is raise the cap. That's
You,
it.
Republicans do such good messaging, bumper sticker messaging, because I think that people are under the impression that we're talking about, you know, taxing people who weren't being taxed at all or something. No, this is like
Yeah.
there are people who at a certain after they make a certain amount, the rest of it does not go into Social
Yeah,
Security.
it's
They don't pay.
$178,000.
And
Anything over
see, and
170.
I thought it was higher.
Nope.
So yeah, so there are more. It's not. It is just making people
So
pay their fair share.
So, Quentin, let me even make you madder. So let's say we raise the cap to 188, and so it meant that I forget. Dang it! I wish numbers stayed in my head. I have to write them down. But
I
there's
always do everything as 100 or 10, just for
well,
theoretical.
thinking about the what is the social security tax now? Well, everybody like wants to think, oh my God, another $5,000. Well, guess what? The employer pays half of that. It's not even
Yeah.
all on
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
not even all on the individual. And so we absolutely, it could be fixed overnight by just raising the cap. And all you have to do is get, an actuarial to sit down and figure out how much we need to raise it and how much we need to raise it by to save it. And it
And
would be fine. But they don't
just
want people to secure, they
just
don't
to
want to
hammer it home
see.
for people, just to hammer it home for people, what we mean is that Elon Musk pays up to he pays the same rate on Social Security as somebody who makes $178,000 a year.
Yeah.
Warren Buffett pays into Social Security the same amount as somebody who makes $178,000 a year. So that's what we mean when we say that there is a cap. That once any salary you make after that, it is treated as if it is not taxable for Social Security
Or
purposes.
Social Security. Yeah,
Yeah,
not
yeah,
income,
yeah.
but yeah.
Not other stuff, but yeah,
Yeah, no, exactly. And so it would, yeah. I'm not for getting rid of the cap entirely, but I am for raising it. Um,
yeah.
yeah. It would make
Okay.
sense because quite frankly, even if I would, my husband and I would end up paying more taxes. Okay, great. Um, not only do I think that would benefit us, would increase their ability to actually adjust Social Security for inflation, right? And so everybody would benefit. But I certainly think that you can enjoy the world more when everybody's doing better. Like
I have believed this about like it is most people are less angry when they're doing okay, when they're comfortable. Like you're not worried about other people's business when you're all right, when the other person's all like when people are doing all right, life is better. There's less crime, like your neighborhood is safer. Things are better when somebody else isn't worrying about their security, when they're not worried
But you're
about their
also able
stability.
to enjoy your blessings more when
That's
you
right.
know other people are doing
No,
well.
that's
It's not
exactly
just
right.
about the negativity of it. It's just like, oh, wow, things are great. And you want everybody to do great, or at least some people in the world do. I think some people, like, I'm sorry, billionaires don't make any sense to me because most of that money is theoretical anyway. I mean, it's not even real. It's like stock money. So, it's like,
Well, we're about to have a trillionaire.
I know. But what I'm saying is that ultimately, if and you and I have talked about the whole love of money is the root of all evil.
Hmm.
Money isn't the root of all evil. It's the love of money that is the root of all evil. So if individual is so hell-bent and determined to accumulate money just for no apparent reason, then it's no longer even about the money. It is about making people suffer. Like, what's the point of all your money when you know that the inequality and the way in which other programs aren't getting invested in is causing people harm, and yet you persist in demanding more tax cuts? Like, that is insane to me. It's not even logical, because they wouldn't even feel the difference. It would have no material effect on their standard of living because they have so much money. So all they need is a tax cut so that other people can at least have. Most people don't want to get rich. I became a college writing instructor. I knew I would make about $30,000 a year. My father tried to support a family on that. I figured if it was just me, I could live on that, read my books, have the summers off to go hiking, seemed pretty good.
Nice.
Most people just want a quiet life where they do some good work that keeps them interesting, is interesting and keeps a roof over their head and food on the table. They don't, that's that, and that's, I don't know, whatever. So the
Well,
billionaires don't even want people to have that.
well, remember when we cut taxes for billionaires, they then reinvest it, and it's
Oh,
good for all of
please.
us. It's
No,
good
you
for
know
all
what is
of us.
the real trickle down thing is the progressive income tax. Because here's the thing. If you
Hmm.
have, all right, so like I suggest that we start at $1 million. We need to create a whole new tax bracket starting at $1 million, and I don't know how many we need. Um,
Hmm.
and then increase the effective rate on that bracket. And again, get an actuary involved to demonstrate how much do we need, how many additional brackets do we need, and what tax rates do we need, to add there, uh, so that we can make up this deficit that's been created by the Trump tax cuts, right?
Yeah.
Figure that out later. But for the most part, you recognize, let's just say that over $1 million, they're going to tax that income as they did back, I think it was FDR. I think Jesse Fleener mentioned that he thought it was in the 60s, that it was like 60%,
Kennedy. Yeah,
90,
yeah, yeah.
or
Kennedy. 90.
90%. Well, obviously, if a company is proposing to pay its executive um, a $2 million salary, there's no point to the second million because it's going to get taxed at 90%.
Hmm.
So instead of making such exorbitant executive salaries, they would instead make all of their other employees just a little bit richer. It would trickle down. So that is the true way to make trickle down work, is to re-employ that a progressive tax rate and increase it. I don't know, 90%. I'll wait until I hear from the actuaries, but certainly you're getting up to 60 pretty quick because we're already at like 47, I think, at the upper income
Is
bracket.
okay.
It,
Yeah,
it, I can't
that's
remember
about no,
30.
that it's 45, 46. Yeah, in that range though. Yeah, I think you're
Right.
right.
And here's why we need to start there, because, we also need a living wage. And
Hmm.
so, the whole are a lot of,
What does that mean for you?
well, I don't know anymore because we've been fighting for 15 for so long. I think it needs to be adjusted for inflation,
Yeah.
and so, but the more important thing is usually the argument against it is that, oh, well, if you pass a living wage, if you increase the minimum wage, it just gets eaten up. It causes inflation and it just gets eaten up and it's meaningless, right? That
Hmm.
doesn't work. But not if you have a progressive income tax in place, because that means that the other salaries don't get commiserately inflated. And so you see what I'm saying? Like
Yeah, yeah.
there's no way to like try to then also increase your executive salaries by an exponential amount because it's just going to get taxed. So I think they need to be
Hmm.
tied together. You need a progressive income tax to go along with the
A living
living
wage.
wage. Mm-hmm.
You actually you give me a good opportunity to kind of contrast a position that you have with Jesse, I believe. What is your and there's a connection here. What is your take on well, I'll make it even more direct. The other argument against the minimum wage that some people make is that, especially once we kind of uh globalized our economy, so you have you're not just having workers competing, Ohio workers competing with other Ohio workers or Kentucky workers, but they're competing with Chinese workers that are working for pennies on the dollar. And now you have the added player in the room of AI. The argument that some have made against the minimum wage is that it makes Americans less competitive, the American worker less competitive, because in a global marketplace, even 7.25 looks like a premium when I can pay a Chinese worker $4, $3 an hour, or I could, pay a one time or a relatively small fee for AI that might do it 80% as well as a human, but it's going to go on for 24 hours and it's going to recoup my investment quickly
What's the objective? What's the end goal?
for
Is
the
it just
employer.
to accumulate more profit?
I think practically speaking, yes.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
there you have it. The objective shouldn't be just accumulating wealth, right? It shouldn't be the love of money. It should be, what does my community need to have to provide for the people who live and work in that community and make sure they all can have a roof over their head and food on the table? What do we need? So I think that's where you look at what kind of, like, we got rid of our manufacturing, right? Like,
Hmm.
back in the day, we would have had manufacturing jobs that people would have, been able to, it would have been hard work, but they would have been able to keep a roof over their head and food on the table and things like that. And so what do we need in our, it's one of the reasons why maybe I shouldn't admit this up front, though. I'm not a fan of self-driving cars. We
Hmm.
need public transportation. We don't need self-driving cars. Um, and one of the reasons why we don't need self-driving cars is because, well, why can't we just pay somebody to drive us around? And that way somebody has a job so they can keep a roof over their head and food on the table. What's the benefit of having a self-driving car? That, might I add, gets into accidents and causes problems and all these other factors. Like, what world are you building with that? So yeah, and I don't believe they're going to be safer, right? I don't believe they're going to be safer. So I don't know. I don't know beyond that. I just want that shift in values instead of, you know, competitive in what market? We want to build a community that we want to live in, and we want other people to be able to survive, and not just survive in, but do well in. And so it I think adds a level of criteria to how you evaluate the not just well the utility, the effectiveness, the meaning of it. So
But
what's another
I
one?
guess, that's the world as it should be, though, right? Like the world as it is, though, is that
Get me started talking
people.
about hope. Yeah.
I mean,
Um,
but I mean and I tell people this about, politics is the art of navigating the world as it is to get to the world as it should be. But the world as it is that people do have to compete with those different, players in the marketplace. They have to compete on a global market. They have to compete now with AI in some cases. And so what does that play a role in your assessment of the need for a living wage? Like, do you balance that at all when you're thinking about policy?
I the thing that gets me about living wage and people saying, let me put it, can I use another example? I don't know if it's
Sure,
relevant. It's the only one
sure.
that's coming to me though. So one of the things that I try to point out is, oh my God, Quentin, can you hear that background noise? I hope not.
No, 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 no,
Okay.
no. I just
Well, I'm very sorry if my
no,
cat vomiting comes through in the audio, but
no. My dog just tried to bark, and he's not allowed to bark for the next month and a half because he had
oh
heartworm procedure, so he
no.
can't get his heart rate up or anything like. He's supposed to be in a crate, and he's not. So I can't
Okay.
let him look out the windows or anything like that.
Well, my cat decided to come over here to vomit on the rug. I'll get it later. So, anyway,
That's
where
gonna be
was
the clip
I?
right there. That's gonna be the clip right there. That's it.
um, so let's look at, so the narrative that was created in the 80s. Oh, we need to
Mhm.
get rid of big government. We got to
Yeah.
get rid of all these public works departments. We got to privatize our trash pickup. And I think the trash one is the best one. So we do not have a local
Hmm.
government trash department in East Baton Rouge Parish. They contract with Republic Waste, right?
Yep. 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 Yep.
And Republic Waste doesn't even do all the work, right? They contract with subcontractors.
Republic
And
Waste is the red ones, right? Are they the
in
red?
blue with a red, I think.
Okay.
It's got
Okay.
blue and the red
Yeah.
logo. And Republic Waste is out of Arizona. I think Bill Gates owns 30% of it. It's a public company, so it's generating, wonderful profits for its shareholders. It's got executives earning exorbitant pay packages. It has board of directors, that meet 4 times a year, getting paid $350,000 a year. And the people that are living and working in our community, maybe our government looks smaller, but now they have lost a livable wage. They have lost access to a secure retirement. They may have lost access to health care. And so they're going to be more vulnerable to insecurity that's going to require social services that we in the community are going to be compelled to provide or, guilted into provide or want to provide. And so it actually doesn't save us any money. We just privatize the public department in order to allow the wealthiest individuals and the shareholders to enrich themselves. So it doesn't make any sense. Like I would say, you bring back an in-house waste, a trash
Hmm.
department, and public waste, and you make sure those workers are paid a livable wage. You make sure they have a retirement. People worked for the government often because they may not have been making as much in the private marketplace, but they knew that they would get access to the pension and that they
Hmm.
wouldn't
Oh yeah.
starve in
Yeah.
their old age.
Hmm.
And they had access to health care. And they took a lower wage, a livable wage, but a lower wage in order to have access to those things. And we
Hmm.
threw them away. And so now our community gets more and more financially and economically insecure, and there's more and more poverty, and there's more and more expectation to spend on social services. And then you get the arguments between what's interesting is the Republicans saying, "Oh, they just don't work hard enough." That's kind of their dominant narrative.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the Democrats are like, "Oh, well, no, we need to do the right thing." Well, you know what? The right thing was to keep the public waste department so that they
Yeah.
could actually just not have to depend upon charity and so that they could actually, earn that man wants to work, like Louis Armstrong says. So, I mean, it's a
So
shift in understanding of the way in which the structure is built.
you might be the perfect person for me to ask this of and I swear to people I will ask her why she's running for Congress. Like we just keep. uh, what is because in many ways, you are kind of a throwback, at least the way that you talk about the role of government. You're kind of a throwback to the classic kind of classic liberalism, classic conservatism, the difference like being based on the role of government. Um, that Democrats traditionally or classic liberals
Newer deal
traditionally believe.
Democrat. I've,
Yeah,
I've,
and
I've
we're
claimed the
gonna
label.
so I'm gonna give you a good segue here.
Okay, yeah.
What is the how do you think about the role of public services and public institutions? When is it when is it necessary? When is it preferred for government to provide a service? What is sort of your barometer for when it's appropriate for government to enter into a sector, a market, to provide a service, and when it's not necessary? How do you sort of make that distinction?
Question. Because I guess what I look for is like, if you introduce a profit motive here, are you going to have a corrupting influence that actually becomes more about enriching the very wealthy and shareholders, the kind of thing, as opposed to just providing the community what it wants? So privatized prisons, right? Bad idea.
Mm-hmm.
You have privatized prisons, you have people who are profiting off the incarceration of individuals. They are going to have a profit motive to incarcerate more people. They are going to
Mm-hmm.
push for policies that will criminalize things that should not be criminalized. They're going to love poverty because people in desperate straits are going to do things that will leave them vulnerable to getting arrested and incarcerated. And then in Louisiana, right, they also essentially have um, uh, but slavery didn't end; it evolved. The
Mm-hmm.
quote from Brian Thompson, because then they also get to put them back to work, right? They profit from their labor,
If you
and
go if you go
so
to Angola, if you go to Angola, it's like walking onto the set of Roots.
it's like you look for it. That's the way I look for it. So we got the same thing going on in our healthcare situation, right? If you have people who are profiting from people's ailments, then the problem is that or denying people care. Then there's this incentive to, well, we're not going to provide them with care because that would eat into our profits, and so that doesn't work, right?
So is
So
your line when a profit motive would have a negative societal impact?
yes, certainly. And so I don't, one of the things I want to caution is that I certainly think we need a private marketplace because
Mm-hmm.
it encourages the government to maintain its integrity, right? Like right now, like I know some people would get worried that I'm suggesting that the government should do everything. Well, no, because we need some competition to make sure that there's an effort to make the government programs run as efficiently and do the job well.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's the problem with the private market is there's a concerted effort of the private market to undermine the public institutions so that they can justify privatizing them, which is what they're doing with public schools right now, and
Mm-hmm.
what they're doing with public hospitals in Louisiana, right? They got rid of Earl K. Long and all the rest. And so but I think education for the public, for the people, if they understood that, if they understood, well, that private marketplace, they need people that can explain, well, they're undermining you. They started trying to undermine public education in the
Mm-hmm.
80s, right? And they
Yeah.
laid the groundwork for decades. I would say they actually started ahead of Brown versus Board, but we'll go with the 80s with the real make it simple. Um, but so it's I think also just raising awareness among the citizenry that this is a tension in our country. We want both, but you need to be wary of if a public institution is beginning to fail. Well, why, and what needs to be done to get it back on track, and then recognize that you need the private market there to offer competition, but also recognize they're always going to be looking for a way to undermine your public institution. So watch out for those yellow flags, and yeah, I don't know.
But you could argue that government could always kind of provide that sort of competitive buffer for the average citizen in any market that it goes into. So I guess that let me sort of I'm I'm going to make a presumption. You tell me if I'm wrong. I am guessing that you are like me and you supported the inclusion of a public option in the ACA. There being a public option in the marketplace to compete with private insurers.
I thought they should have switched to the whole universal.
No, I think in an ideal setting, yes, I think single payer makes sense. But like
Yeah.
at the time, it was feasible that we could have had the ACA plus a public option. And I've said this on other interviews. The reason it didn't happen was Ted Kennedy died in the middle of the in the middle of us passing the bill, and for whatever reason, we could not win his seat back in Massachusetts. Scott Brown won, and with 59 senators, Democrats still could not pass their ideal healthcare legislation, which I say all the time. If Republicans just had 50, they would govern as if they had a supermajority. But the public option, which was going to be there as sort of, it was going to keep other insurers honest because it didn't have to make a profit. It could be at almost at cost, and that's what keeps the other insurers honest. But I would guess that you would not be in favor of, for example, the government getting into the business of selling vehicles.
No, I would
So
not.
what's the difference between
Hmm.
healthcare and access to a car?
Um, well, if we have public transportation, access to a car should be optional. Wouldn't you want to hop on a train to go over to Texas instead of a plane right now? Shouldn't
It
we
would be
have some more?
nice.
Wouldn't that be nice? Um, Let's me think about that. So, well, healthcare for me is I just trying to put a profit motive on somebody's need to access healthcare. It just seems so wrong, right? I mean, how can you justify, really one of the things I've been trying to understand too, because we've started privatizing Medicare, right? All these
Mm-hmm.
Medicare Advantage plans,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and recognizing that even that becomes like the private they can manipulate it. So the government's trying to offset the cost. They want to make sure that the private plans will take the sickest people.
Mm-hmm.
And so they offer an additional fee if somebody has other ailments, right? But then the private insurers have an incentive to overdiagnose things so that they can get the additional government money. So that to
Mm-hmm.
me is like, well, that's not even efficient, right? Like
No.
it's actually requiring more tax dollars from the public to provide and it doesn't even increase the quality of care.
Yeah.
And so I think it's sort of recognizing in what areas we don't want that to occur is, it, people's health, access to getting just basic care has to be available to all. Franklin FDR, Franklin Roosevelt, he had that listed in his second Bill of Rights, which he called for before he died, and so it didn't happen. But universal health care was one of them on his list. So it's
Okay, so that's a perfect segue. So you describe yourself as a newer deal Democrat.
yeah,
Uh, FDR was the original New Deal Democrat.
yeah.
What does a newer deal Democrat mean in practical terms?
Well, practical terms, I'm gonna still kind of theoretical terms, I guess. It's a narrative, right? Certainly, I think when I look at the benefits of the New Deal, I mean, I think my family is to some extent probably an example of that. I mean, the GI Bill, which wasn't really the New Deal, was the biggest benefit to
Mm-hmm.
the trajectory of my family. Uh, so my father was already working in the paper mill when he was in high school, but it was during World War II. So he enlisted as a Marine, got sent to Okinawa, injured, Purple Heart, came home, had the GI Bill, which allowed him to go to college. He never would have had access to go to college. I mean, the same for my husband's father as well. Poor Southern white man, enlisted in the Army for World War II, got the GI Bill, and he PhD. But this is a total other side. Founding executive director of the Amistad Research Center. I
Oh
mean,
well.
big trajectory shift, right? And so the notion that recognizing that the Social Security and access to wage and access to education and how that just shifted the whole family's ability, and then recognizing that this was the period of time where we had the largest expansion of the middle class. It's what really actually helped distribute provide everybody with access to a livable wage and
Hmm.
fear, secure retirement. They didn't have to end up in poverty. I just, when I see all of the ills coming back, it's usually tied to the ways in which they've eroded the antitrust and anti-monopoly bills that passed to keep businesses from dominating, and then the other social programs that also helped provide that social safety net. I mean, have you ever read The Jungle? Upton Sinclair?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, long time ago. Long time ago.
Yeah, yeah, me too.
That
Actually,
that
I
that
have a
was that was what inspired my favorite president to form the USDA.
Yeah, right. Which was funny because, I mean, in that book, which for anybody who knows, it's like a historical fiction book. Well, it's not
Hmm.
historical. It was
It's inspired by what he experienced in those mills.
right. So you have one character who is experiencing all sorts of terrible things back to back so that he can
Hmm.
illustrate all the ills in society at that time.
Hmm.
And the saddest thing was, as you look at this individual, it's been a long time. Like I was an undergrad when I read it, so that was a long time ago.
Oh,
Um,
I think it was high school maybe.
Yeah, it was all of these ills and but what the only thing that came out of it was most people were appalled by the way in which animals were slaughtered, and they
Hmm.
realized that the food they were getting was probably contaminated. And so
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
what came out of the jungle was, okay, we have a food safety program, which is good, it's important, but it was kind of sad that initial impulse wasn't to try to help the people get a little bit protection from the corporations that were exploiting them and stuff.
Well,
But
I mean, the money typically controls the narrative until it becomes personal. So, screw the worker. Oh, but there's like rat meat in my. Okay, all right, all right.
yeah.
Now I'm angry. But I mean that. But there's a reality to that when it comes to politics, and I guess I'm wondering in all of the political I keep saying fights. I don't want it to. I don't want to like characterize you as just like
Disagreements?
in all of the political squabbles. It doesn't get any better. I don't have any better phrases. But in a lot of these instances, what are the practical lessons that you've learned about, like, have you learned anything from your opponents politically, particularly when you haven't been on the winning side? Like, did you learn anything from the St. George people?
Did I learn? Hmm. So, you know what I think is interesting? Maybe not what you would think they taught me,
Okay.
right? Because the narrative for the St. George effort was that city of Baton Rouge, it's been a drag on our budget. They're taking our money, and we're just tired of it. We want to take our resources back. And if you do the research, it is the opposite that is
Oh
true.
yeah, and they're learning that
It,
firsthand right now.
well, and so that was the thing. But also, what I learned in doing the research was the way in which the groundwork had been laid
Hmm. Yeah.
20, 30 years
Hmm.
ago.
Yeah.
It had been laid 30 years ago, but we don't have that collective memory in order to recognize that, which is one of the reasons why I'm against term limits, Quentin.
You're against them.
Yes.
Okay. 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 Let's see.
So,
The way the internet works, we have to go down this path. Why are you against
well,
term limits?
no, I got to finish the St.
Okay.
George.
Okay. Okay.
But so you look at that, right? So you watch the ways in which, first of all, let's see, now I can't do it quick. We didn't have a Metro Council.
Hmm.
We had a combined council, right? It
Yep.
had a
Yep. Yep.
city
Yep.
council
Hmm.
and a parish council, and the city council sat on the combined city parish council, and altogether they decided city parish managers
Hmm.
matters, but the city council only could decide city matters.
City. Yeah.
Right? This is why the Scotlandville thing would be a really good, interesting conversation right now, but oh my God, it'll take too long. So it was in it actually I can't avoid it because that was the thing. I think for Scotlandville kind of got thrown under the bus, according to an article I read published in one of the Southern University journals, according to that writer, by a coalition between the white businessmen and professional African Americans who made a deal to get Scotlandville incorporated into Baton Rouge city limits. See, for years they kept Baton Rouge city limits really small so they could make sure that the body that held all the power and the votes, like right, was
Hmm.
majority white. And so that was the one that always had the votes for the matters for the city parish. And so um, they allowed Scotlandville to come in, and I think the thought was, okay, great, now we'll have some African American representation on this combined city parish body. But
Uh-huh.
within 2 years, they created the Metro Council, which completely obliterated the
Hmm.
city's control, and it actually spread out, dispersed, and put more of the control into the unincorporated area. And then slowly you can watch the erosion of the institutions that actually allow for the governing body to address the economic inequalities in the community. And one of the things that got passed was the Horizon Plan, which then it allowed the Consolidated Metro Council to spend the city's money in the unconsolidated area. They weren't allowed to do that before then. They could only, city revenue generated within the city had to be spent within the city limits. If you wanted city revenue, you had to annex the area into the city limits. They changed that in the late 80s after they consolidated the Metro Council, which disenfranchised the voters and the majority African American voters because of the incorporation of Scotlandville. And so then they started spending all the money to
Yeah.
build up the infrastructure, which
Hmm.
built all the tax drivers, and they never annexed it into the city limits. And then you have 30 years later, St. George people going, oh, they're taking all our money. Well, the city invested that infrastructure. You at least
Yeah.
have to compensate the city for that infrastructure, and at the market rate, not at the rate they spent. They paid to build it, but that narrative gets lost. Nobody raises it. I think there are people who absolutely know that information. They just don't choose to share it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, yeah, I think that's the, I don't want to call it the undercard of like fights like the St. George fight, but I think it's certainly like the B side of it. Um, it just doesn't get talked about because it's not as inflammatory as the racial argument, the racial side of it. But I think, yeah, I think just the hustling of Baton Rouge, uh, and I think one of the more extreme examples, not here in Louisiana, is like Jackson, Mississippi, where Jackson, Mississippi is the state capital. It is the biggest city in Mississippi. It's also majority black, and so as a result, the state legislature controls most of Jackson, Mississippi, and most importantly, how Jackson, Mississippi spends its money.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so our legislature does that regularly too, right? New Orleans will try to
Mhm.
pass
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
increase in the minimum wage, and then suddenly the legislature is passing some law that forbids them from doing it. They meddle. Yeah, it's but there's always that. So
Okay, so why are you running for Congress?
why am
What
I
made
running
you
for
decide to do
Congress?
this? Especially since a lot of your fights have been local, and so this
Yeah,
is a
but
bigger fight.
in principle, it's the same fight. So just want to
Uh-huh.
say that. And but at this particular moment, because
Hmm.
of the unique moment we're in the nation and at the local, in the state level, and also within the party. So the closed primary offers a very unique opportunity. I'm really excited about being able to meet the other candidates. I mean, it sounds like we're all been kind of advocates within our
Hmm.
respective communities, and they're all over the state. And it's very hard to find people doing this work because it doesn't get
Yeah,
in the news. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like,
yeah.
and so I got to meet him on a Zoom. That doesn't count. So I'm looking forward to meeting him in person on Saturday, and to exchange ideas and talk about issues. And same for the party. We have a closed primary. We actually get to have thoughtful conversation. We actually get to talk about issues and discuss them and debate them to improve our ideas without having to like frame it in response to the Republican narrative. The Republicans have so much money; they get to dominate the narrative such crazy ways. But that means we haven't been thoughtfully able to talk about these issues. And we've also, quite frankly, in the fifth, I think we more than likely, I mean, I assume we've been neglecting. I've felt neglected in the fifth in terms of speaking to our concerns and things like that, because it's assumed it's a Republican district. And
Yeah.
so there's nobody who's really talking to you about your concerns. And so I think now that we have a closed primary and we can talk about these issues and we can hopefully re-engage individuals, the voters and the people in all the parishes so that they can get involved with it and see the ways in which they can make a difference. I do think the party needs more infrastructure to really, precinct captains and the like,
Hmm.
and a clear endorsement process and all these things that need to go on in order to really allow us to begin to build that genuine democratic engagement where people can talk at the precinct level amongst their community, and then we can elect other leaders. And I think that's so we're at that moment. And then if you go up against the Republican, I mean, I certainly think the fifth district is flippable.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm not unfazed about the prospect of arguing with a Republican. So it seemed like a good moment. And I'm an empty nester. My kids just went off to college. So I don't,
There's that reality. Yeah.
there is that reality, right? I have the time and the ability to focus all my energy on it.
So this is a largely pretty rural district actually.
Yeah.
Outside of the little bit of Baton Rouge that's in it. It's a big district.
Yeah.
What is your plan for uh, winning the primary first? Because you have two elections that you got to focus on, but
Yeah.
the first one's most important. What is your plan for winning the primary, and in particular, how do you plan to do outreach in the rural areas of the district?
Um, I don't know how I'm going to win the primary. I mean, I honestly, I think winning the primary is probably tougher than beating the Republican. So that's the way I kind of look at it.
Do
So
you have
I'll
an idea
just
of what your coalition in the primary looks like? Like, could you?
coalition.
Yeah. So oftentimes people are sort of like, all right, I think what my path is I'm gonna consolidate the unions and the white working class, or I'm gonna get the black folks, or I'm gonna get the young people. Like, sort of, do you have an idea of what a Nyman voter looks like right now?
I
Who you
don't
might
think
be
I'm
naturally
sorry, I don't
appealing
think
to?
anybody knows what the voters in District 5, just Democratic voters and independent voters in District 5 look like because we haven't really been engaging with them. And so I'm really
Mm,
curious to find out. I do think there's a few issues, like, and I have a lot of learning to do. I can understand why people in rural areas would be really suspect of me. I grew up in New Orleans. I've lived in Baton Rouge, the two biggest places. I haven't lived in rural Louisiana, but I hope there's a couple of places where I think my experience and my background knowledge is applicable, and that's to that data center they're bringing in and the carbon
mhm,
capture projects, where I think my ability to recognize the tax structure manipulations that are systematically depriving those communities. They're not bringing any meaningful benefits to those communities, right?
mhm,
And so being able to be a good advocate for that type of stuff, I think that is key. There's other things that I need to learn more about. I'd like to learn more about before I make some hard and fast rules about things. But
mhm,
even like in my newer deal, Democrat, um, understanding see, I did it again. There's an act that actually I was reading about the decimation of the grocery stores in little towns and how it's
mhm.
because they stopped enforcing this one New Deal Act. Pacman. I'll look it up for you. I'm sorry. I've looked it up, but I didn't remember the title. I posted it on my community advocate Facebook page this morning. So
Okay.
anybody wants to go, I found it and I reshared this old post. It has an article in there. In that article, it mentions this act and all the ways in which it devastated smaller grocery stores. And so all we need to do is start reinforcing it. So it's understanding history like that, I think, will be pertinent to the people in District 5, even though to rural areas and small towns, even though I'm not from a rural area and small town, though my parents were. I don't know if that helps any.
Mhm,
Um, and then in terms of moving forward, I am just going to try to meet as many people as I can and attend as many forums and try to find people who will host house parties so that I can, I mean, it, no harm, no foul. I'll tell them where I stand and what I think and give my opinions. I certainly expect to learn a lot. I hope I do as much listening as I do talking, which will be hard for me because I clearly, when I start answering questions, I like to talk. I'm sorry. Um, but and then it's if I'm not the favorite candidate, so be it. It's okay. I'll get behind the one that they prefer, and hopefully we can flip the district and move on along, go back to books and you know and research and local politics and see what next captures my attention and that I'll devote my time and energy to.
But are you running to win?
Oh, absolutely. I honestly, I really think it's flippable. I mean, but but win or lose, we win by raising the issues.
You know how I feel. You know how
Uh,
I feel.
yeah, this is where you and I disagree a lot. Charlotta Bass, vice presidential candidate in the 1950s, win or lose, we win by raising the issues. And Quentin, it's important. That's why the fifth district has been neglected so often, because there's been no opportunity to discuss the issues. And you can see how the Democratic Party has been compelled in the state to get more and more conservative, or
Yeah.
it's because of that. We need people talking about the issues so that they don't, they learn about them. And
But I think
so,
Democrats show up. I think Democrats show up when they feel like the Democratic candidate is actually like has a shot at winning and is trying to win. I think sometimes Democratic apathy is tied to, oh, okay, like, we got this personality who's
I
running
think
and
it's
clearly
tied
isn't
to
trying to win.
I think it's tied to when they don't think the candidate is offering a meaningful difference. And I to the neoliberal uh, wing of the Democratic Party has been terrible for us. I'm sorry, it's been terrible.
I think anytime neo is in front of the word, it's usually an indicator that you're about to be bamboozled.
Well, most people don't recognize that. Of course, they don't all go around advertising that this is a neoliberal policy either. Just the public-private partnership is supposed to be so wonderful, and typically it's not so wonderful for the people who live and work in the community. So, and I know a lot of Democrats thought that was an exciting way to try to get elected. It seemed like the compromise and everything else, but I think it would have been better if we fought for the reasons where, for the institutions where government is needed and
Yeah.
why, and raise the issue about why, and continue to fight for that, and not just start getting cowed. Um, I guess when it's like win or lose, you think I don't think I can win, or that I don't. It's not that. It's that a respect for the democratic process.
Yeah.
It's not all me. I can't force people to get to the polls. It's up to them
Mhm.
too. We all have our own level of responsibility. It pains me. I know there's a lot of people in the state right now that are considering switching their party affiliation or voting in the Republican primary, even though they vote in the Democratic primary, because they want to have exercise some influence in the Senate race. Thinking that between Letlow and Cassidy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if you keep voting for the least objectionable person, you're never going to
Yeah.
demonstrate who is the ideal person.
Hmm.
Because, of course, you know, people believing District 5 isn't winnable affects who decides to run in it.
Yeah.
So, to
No,
some
you're right.
extent, you need my attitude in order to make these leaps of faith. Win or lose, we win by raising the issues. If I win, that will be fabulous, because I think I would be a much better advocate for the people in the state of Louisiana than any one of the Republicans. And so, but if I don't, I still have had an opportunity to meet with people and talk about the issues and raise awareness. So, you know, just going back to my teacher role.
Okay. I know that we are well
We're at
over
time.
time. Well, but there are some important ones that I like to
Okay,
ask of
wait,
everybody.
wait, wait, no, I have to go back to the term limits, because now I'm going to
Yeah,
have so
no, I
many.
was gonna ask. I was gonna ask. I was trying to figure out a way that I could weave it into some of these other ones because I
So,
didn't want to just like go. But yeah, let's
yeah,
go back
no,
to
no,
that. But why
no,
are
we have
you?
to go back to it because
Yeah,
it's going to
why are
be.
you not in favor? Why are you not in favor of term limits? Yeah,
So first of all, I want to say one of the reasons why I got to explain this in depth is because I am going to be so totally targeted
I know,
overtly
I
and
know, I know.
undermined by, in
Pe-
nefarious ways,
People who are
because
not going to listen to what you're about to say, they just heard you say that you're against term limits, and they're like, ah,
that's a shame, because term limits have been horrible. For one, all I need to do is point to the Louisiana state legislature and
hmm,
say, do you really think term limits improve that body? We now have a supermajority of Republicans. I mean, it is not an advantage. Really, the term limit is your vote. If you have a problem with somebody who's in office, then you vote them out
yeah,
and you make sure. And it also, so, all right. The other thing is that the only people that term limits gets rid of are the public servants, the true public servants. the people that are there for the right reasons and who want to make a
Yeah.
profession out of serving the people. And so, and I'm sorry, at 10 years, you're just really getting your feet wet in your profession. And we term limit them out at 12. That's right when they're suddenly beginning to connect the dots and understand the way in which the previous policy is informing they're now, that is now informing another bad policy, or, being manipulated to, like the way charter schools were presented as one thing and then slowly morphed into another. You need somebody with the historical perspective, and they need to be able to be in there for 20 to 30 years. I do think people need to, like, uh, mentor folks so that they have somebody to take their place, but I don't
Well, I mean,
since
they
you
do
know what
that
you mean,
now.
they shouldn't be dying in office. Let me put it that way. They
Well,
should.
they do that now. A lot of congressmen are succeeded by their former
I
chief of staff and things
Well,
like
yeah, I
that.
know some of them, they need to do that. But so when I first learned about term limits, I was kind of ambivalent about them, whatever,
Hmm.
And then I started my advocacy work at the Capitol, and I saw the real effect of it. And I really saw the effect of it recently when, so the St. George thing, when John Bell Edwards thankfully got elected, right? He was on the House Education Committee when we were doing the biggest fight against the breakaways.
Hmm.
So remarkable to have him, Alfred Williams, and Patricia Smith on the
Hmm.
House Ed Committee. And so you always had people who understood the issues, could ask the tough questions, could come back. It was marvelous because they had this, long-standing understanding. They had this historical understanding of what was going on.
Yeah.
Um, so he gets into the governorship, but then what's his name? Neil Abramson flipped the all the committees, right? Flipped his
Hmm.
vote. He was a Democrat who flipped his vote to the
Yeah.
Republicans.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
then all the committees were locked up by Republicans. So at that point, I'm like, okay, nothing good is getting out of committee. If something bad gets out, I got to count on John Bell Edwards to veto it. And I'm going back to the local level. And so I just started focusing on the local level at that point in time, because that's where I felt like we needed sort of boots on the ground. And
Hmm.
so, but lo and behold, when was it? When Chenevert came back with the bill that was going to surreptitiously get St. George approved without a constitutional amendment, without a vote
Hmm.
of the people. And so I'm like, oh, I got to go back down to the Capitol. And I show up. There's nobody that was there when I was fighting before John Bell Edwards. It's
Hmm.
all new legislators, and they don't know me from Boo, and they don't know the issue from Boo. And so suddenly it's like, oh my goodness, how do I begin now? And quick top speed,
Yeah.
trying to explain to them the whole maneuvering of the breakaway school district, and why this is such a pressing issue and so important and threatens public education across the state. And so
Yeah.
you can really see the effect of that. You need people who can stay in office for well past 12 years. And the fact is they're not entrenched if, one, we got rid of Citizens United, right? Because then they wouldn't be able to garner so much dark money to keep them in office. And also, someone else pointed out that sometimes people don't want to run against some incentive for term limits. Um, we need to run against some of our sitting elected officials, right? Like you did, Quentin, right? It's important that the people in office get challenged. If you're just waiting for them to get term limited out, that that doesn't add to the conversation, the discussion. And also the corporate money can always find somebody willing to take their money to run for office and do whatever they say. It's harder to find people who really want to research the issues and get to the bottom of it and do the right thing. And so they need to be supported, and they are supported by having the opportunity to serve their constituents for their entire career and not have to go look in 12 years hat in hand to the corporate world to give them a job so that they can keep a roof over their head and food on the table. So term limits are just a
No.
bad idea all around. It is an erosion of the integrity of our democracy. I'm going to get so many mailers sent out against
You
me. They're
are.
probably
You
not even going
are.
to be about term limits. They're going to accuse me of other things. But
It's
that is an issue that we need to address, and it actually is. Yeah, it's an issue that needs to be discussed and bantered about because it's been internalized by too many people in that younger generation. Quentin, too many people in that younger generation have
there.
been
There are other. I'm getting older,
bad
so
issues.
I'm getting to middle age, so I'm part of a broader
Because you're
broader
younger.
swath of voters. Yeah,
I
a little
know
bit,
they've been
but
working for decades. you
I
know?
just, I think that I certainly can see the argument that if you keep on having new people in there, but a lot of the entrenched interests are still there, you have lobbyists that have been there 50 years, right? So like they know the game, so they get a new freshman, they can work the freshman differently than they work, a senior legislator,
Who
that
got the
sort of thing.
freshmen elected, Quentin?
Probably that lobbyist.
No, no. Well, I mean, the corporation who's,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, the
I mean,
industry
it's
that
not the
they're lobbying
lobbyists, it's
for.
the business and industry. And
Yeah.
quite frankly, that's always been a problem where business and industry gets somebody into a, a, a department or something and then shapes the rules in a way that benefits
Oh yeah.
that company. And then that individual goes back to the company with this,
Yeah. Oh
you know,
yeah.
so term limits.
Republicans do it all that like it'll be an oil executive who steps down, runs for Senate, serves for 12 years, and then goes right back to the oil company afterwards.
Right.
And,
So term limits only exacerbate that issue even among the Democratic or the more liberal side of you eliminate the possibility for genuine public service because at the end of your term, you got to find a job. Where are you going to find a job? It starts creating the incentive to like, oh shoot, I'm going to have to find a job if I don't side with industry on this one and they're not going to give me a job when I'm term limited out in 2 years. It's a bad model.
it is almost, especially, I might agree with you if we didn't have gerrymandering, but because we have gerrymandering,
But
you
how are
know,
you going to 12 years? Nobody's going to you're going to get a new person in there who doesn't understand the
well,
gerrymandering.
you
So
could argue that it would incentivize people to be more prepared when they run, because you know that like I'm only going to be here for so long, and everybody there is going to be relatively fresh, right? Everybody is either 12 years or less. No, I hear
no,
you. I hear you. I just
it's not
what my biggest
incentivizing me to run.
what my biggest concern is that incumbency is so difficult to defeat, and so
But that
once,
but but the term limits aren't the solution. Two wrongs don't make a right. The solution is to get rid of Citizens United. The solution is to educate the public about what harm gerrymandering does. The solution is to make sure voters have access at the polls. You can't fix the problems with our election integrity by then instituting another bad policy. So I'm going to
yeah,
convince you. You don't have to
see what
convince you
what
on air. I'll let you sleep on it. I'll let you sleep on it.
one of these days, I maybe we'll see. Um, do you let's talk about if you were to win, do you have any committees that you've thought about that you'd want to serve on in the House?
Well, I would certainly want to be on education, right? But I also want to be on which one's going to allow me to start arguing for a progressive income tax starting at $1 million. Those would be two up
Yeah,
there. I could do
yeah.
environmental stuff too, certainly because understanding the ways in which, Louisiana is just, our environmental issues. But our environmental issues begin with our tax structure. So either one. But those are the two that would be at the top: education and whatever allows me to get in on the taxing.
Okay.
What other? Did you get some recommendations for me?
No, nothing. I mean, I think um energy makes sense. I think for any Louisiana congressman, I think energy just makes sense. Um,
I don't think they're going to want me there. The energy
no, I
industry.
think that's important though. I think that's
Yeah,
important. That's
yeah,
important.
I would do
Uh,
that one. Absolutely. Europe
yeah,
passed a windfall tax, and
yeah.
they're still doing business over there.
I think being a thorn in the side of the energy committee would be good. I think that'd
Yeah, I
be.
could do that.
Um, so, and this is the question I was thinking about earlier. One thing people who know you would say is that you take policy very seriously. You actually want people to understand the issue, not just clap at a slogan.
Yeah.
But, but Tanya Nyman, modern campaigns reward brevity, emotional clarity, and speed. How are you thinking about adjusting your communication style for a political environment that often punishes nuance?
I am going to learn as I go. I don't know how else to say it because the other thing is I think sometimes I think those little edicts get passed
Mhm.
down because they encourage people to believe they must dumb down their message. And I think there's a lot of people in our communities who are desperate for real information. They don't want somebody talking to them like they don't. I mean, I get it, I
Yeah.
know, but So let's find out. I mean, there are lots of opportunities for me. Every once in a while, I can do it succinctly. It's kind of few, and it depends upon the person too, Quentin. Like you and I
Yeah,
will also,
yeah, yeah.
we go down all those rabbit holes. So, but I think when the whole expression of meet them where they are kind of thing,
Hmm.
you meet a person where they are and try to talk about that. Of course, I think it's also important just to remember that we're all trying to have compassion for one another and respect the inherent dignity. And we're going to have differences. It's important to remember that. I'm working on that more and more the older I get.
Will you turn away a Nyman supporter who supports you because he just likes the shoes that you're wearing?
Well, no, because that's not offensive. I mean, I like shoes.
Well, because sometimes I had one person say that he was voting, and he had all sorts of offensive other views that he had, but he said the reason he was voting for me, uh, what was it? Oh, he said it was because of the car that I was driving, and that he didn't support anybody that drove, and then he used a racial slur about the other types of cars,
Yeah,
and I could have fought with him, I could have disagreed with him right there on his porch. But I
yeah.
was like, all right, thank you, sir. I appreciate your support. And I went to the next house.
I don't know. Honestly, I think we've all had moments like that in our life where somebody says something and it kind of takes you aback and you don't quite know how. And sometimes I can find good words to say, and sometimes, you just have to. I don't know. I don't know, Quentin. I mean, it's not like I'm going to say no. You like my shoes? Great, like my shoes. But that what you're talking about, that's a whole other kettle of fish. Can I well, I don't know. I grew up liberal in New Orleans in the 80s, which meant that I think I've learned. I mean, it was so in the South. I know that may seem like, oh, New Orleans is so liberal, but not the people I knew. It was like I was the crazy liberal, right? Um, but eventually learned how to let people know, like, and it was kind of nice because you would sort of like, all right, I'm sorry, back up. First of all, if somebody said something that was the predominant narrative and you objected, that's considered rude in 1980 Southern
Hmm.
circles, right? And so the trick for me became, but I always had that obligation sort of instilled in family. You have to speak out if there is something in injustice, right? So I learned a defensive mechanism of trying to signal ahead of time where my politics were. So the other person had to avoid the conversation. And so then what was nice is that those people who wanted to genuinely have a conversation, well, we would have genuinely have a conversation.
Hmm.
But those
Yep.
people who just wanted to spout, you know, superficial ideas that, they they would get the hint and they wouldn't raise a certain topic. And so it was so I think if I encounter someone who doesn't recognize that I'm likely going to disagree with what they're about to say, that uh, there's other ways that they generally then they're counting on being engaged, even if it's going to be politely.
Well, I guess I just mean, are you okay with the superficiality of politics? That there are going to be some people that support you because they can recite your policy positions, but then there are going to be some people that support you because they absolutely hate all of your opponents. There are going to be some people that support you because they
I
completely
can't
misinterpret your policy positions.
I can't control that, Quentin. I can't control that. That's where I would say how I would decide. I'm always going to try
It's
to
not going to
make
keep you up at night.
only if it was that well, only if it was coming from a segment of the society whose values I would be worried about and I would be like, "Oh my
I guess
God,
yeah,
am I being
yeah.
used? Am I being co-opted? Am I like
If all of a sudden David Duke was like, Tanya Nyman is our girl, you're like, whoa,
yeah,
let me
you're
go
like,
look at
wait,
my website really quickly.
right?
What exactly is happening?
Right. Exactly. That would be it. That would be the only thing I'd be like, I'd have to, give the side eye to it and wonder. But again, it's always like try to live from a genuine place and not shy away from any tough discussions and then only try to control what is within my power to control. And so that's where I would fall on, if somebody wants to vote for me for my shoes, go right ahead. And I'm trying to leave the 12-year-old minivan at home for any political events, though I guess I am cognizant of some of it, but
I don't know. That adds character a little bit.
yes,
Okay,
it's a
so
good little car.
if you had 30 seconds with a low information voter in the 5th district who's frustrated, busy, and suspicious of politics, what would you say to earn their vote?
What's their age bracket?
Oh, Jesus,
Well,
Tanya. Let's
it's
let's
okay. I can't really, can
50,
I tell?
50, 52.
52.
52, and let's make it male. There it
Whoo.
is. Yeah.
Do I know they're Republican? Or are they no
We
party?
probably had the same image in our head of generic Louisiana 52-year-old guy, probably dad bod.
Um, well, I would start. I'm a newer deal with Democrat. Got it. Do I have to deliver it like I'm really talking to this 52 year
No,
old?
like okay, so you're canvassing, you're knocking on doors, and he answered the door.
Yeah. Well, I guess I would start talking about just how to make things affordable and how this vision would allow his whole family to thrive, right? You must be looking to get your kids in college. Wouldn't it be nice if college tuition was affordable? Wouldn't it be nice if you had a Social Security to rely on? That your kids could access health care so you don't have to worry about that. My husband's worried about health care. I mean, it's yeah, that's a big one. You understand that that's what we need. We need universal health care so that people don't have to worry about it and don't have to be tied to their employer to get access to their health care. It helps small businesses. It helps families at every bracket. It makes sense. You don't have to worry about your kids. I think it's a big one. No?
How did you feel about that?
How did I feel about what? Nah,
About
it's
that
kind of probably
pitch?
pretty lame, but I'm never going to do like act now, Tanya. It's going to be the pretend you're standing on the doorstep as it feels too artificial. But I
Well,
mean,
and
in the
you never
moment,
know what happens. You never
in
know
the
what the
moment,
interaction
in
is.
the moment, I hope I'll do better. How's that?
I
And
think you're
we
gonna
you
do
won't
fine.
know until I try.
I think you're gonna do fine. You got a big district to do it in. What is it? 14,000 square miles?
That minivan,
14,700. 14,700 square miles.
that minivan's going to be getting a lot of wear and tear.
Yeah, no, they don't. I don't think they let you lease a car if you
No,
if you
it's
say
all
you're
right.
running for office.
I'm gonna make no, we actually we do have the car. Our kids are off at college, so we have a spare car, and so I'll steal my husband's car. It's newer.
Oh, put those miles on his car. Put those miles on his
Exactly.
car.
There we go.
All right. So Tanya Nyman, Democrat, running for Congress in Louisiana's 5th Congressional District as a newer deal Democrat. The
Yeah.
primary is on May 16th. Tanya, thank you for joining me.
Oh, thank you, Quentin. Always delightful to talk to you.